Hello, I'm Andrea Gonzalez with Trellis Strategies. Thank you for joining our discussion today. We are in our third Trellis Strategies 360 discussion series. And in this series, we are discussing the modern learner and the multiple personas and commitments they navigate. This discussion today is our third in the series on the modern learner, and we will specifically be discussing employment opportunities learners negotiate while they are enrolled in post-secondary education. Our discussion will be led by our president and CEO, Dr. Debra Chromy. And I see the filing in of our attendees has leveled off. So Debra, let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Andrea, and thanks for all your work behind the scenes to get this set up. We are in for a treat today. I am really pleased to be here. As Andrea mentioned, my name is Dr. Chromy, Debra Chromy. I'm President and CEO at Trellis. And welcome to this month's Trellis 360 discussion. Today's topic is Earn and Learn, Employment Opportunities While Enrolled. I'm so pleased to see some returning attendees who have participated in past Trellis 360 discussion series. And I see a couple of new names and faces as well in our audience. So thank you for joining us. As always, I know we're going to have a great discussion as I am joined by two panelists who know a great deal about this topic. I'm going to start with introductions. First up is Erica Simon. She's Deputy Director of Strategy and Higher Education at Educate Texas. In that role, Erica co-leads Career Connected Texas, and it is a peer learning network that brings together leaders from across the state to build education to workforce pathways. I'm going to ask her to tell you all a little bit more about her work before we jump in to our discussion. But first, let me introduce Dr. Dave Clayton. He is Senior Vice President of Research at Strata Education Foundation. Dave leads a research team focused on understanding individuals' aspirations, experiences, and outcomes associated with education after high school. Their work informs educators, policymakers, employers, thought leaders, and funders seeking to ensure the success of students is well beyond just the completion of their credentials and degrees. So again, thank you both, Dave and Erica, for joining us. And I'm going to start off with Erica. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do at Educate Texas, specifically related to Career Connect Texas, as it will help people understand where you're coming from with this discussion?
Sure. No, great to be here. Thank you so much to Trellis Strategies for inviting me to be part of this discussion today. So Erica Simon, I work at Educate Texas, which is part of the Communities Foundation of Texas, and I lead a initiative called Career Connect Texas. And really the goals of this initiative are closing equity gaps and getting students to successful careers. And we do that by working with community colleges and workforce boards and economic development organizations across the state to help build capacity for work-based learning, types of work-based learning models. So really thinking about youth apprenticeships, any form of paid internships. We really focus on creating earn and learn opportunities for students, both high school students through youth apprenticeships starting at 16 and 17 years old, and through CTE programs in both high school and colleges, and then for even incumbent workers, folks that want to be upskilled or reskilled to get better jobs. So we're really about building the economy by using work-based learning to get folks to middle skill and high skill jobs that pay a livable wage. So we've been doing this work since 2021, when we launched as the Workforce Education Community College Apprenticeship Network, which is kind of a mouthful. The acronym was We Can Texas, but we really learned that we were about connecting people to careers. So we changed our names to Career Connect Texas, and that's what we focus on doing. So excited to talk more about earn and learn opportunities, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Clayton.
And actually, I'm going to preview Dr. Clayton just a little bit, or Dave. I'm going to call him Dave. I know him as Dave, so I think you prefer that, right, Dave?
Yep.
So, Dave, I'm actually going to ask you to chat a little bit about this study you did in April, the inaugural State Opportunity Index. I know some of the folks on participating today are familiar with that and probably have read the report or sat in on one of the webinars. But could you just provide a quick high-level, I guess, refresher on the purpose and primary findings of the report and what you hope to do next with that?
Thank you, Deborah and Erica and Andrea, for getting us started, and those of you who joined. You'll note in my introduction was focused on a team. And so this State Opportunity Index, led by Dr. Nicole Torpe-Sabo on our team and colleagues across the organization, is really an aspirational effort to provide each state with their progress report and a profile of their progress across 6 key dimensions annually. We had the prototype report released this past April, and we'll build from it. We've learned a few things, but October 2025 is the next one. And those 6 dimensions we look at, are individuals better off? Do they have a positive ROI? Not maximizing the earnings, but can they break even on the cost of their post-secondary education and training within a 10-year period? So each state, what percentage of individuals, not median at an institution level, but actually what percentage of residents in a state with an associate or a bachelor's degree can pay off that price? And then underneath that, what are the ingredients? What are the things we can do constructively to increase that percentage, who break even, who cross that positive threshold? And that really starts with affordability not being a barrier in the first place. And so that's one dimension we look at. How much would a student need to work in each state in order to pay the net price of in-state tuition overall and at 4-year and 2-year publics in those states? Then we look at the guidance and coaching to connect education to career, and what percentage of students actually experience timely information and support and guidance as they go through that journey from, K through 12 into, and Erica, so much of the work you're doing, I'm sure, is on the front line, so it'll be fun to hear about that. And then you also alluded, Erica, to a key driver that we've identified in the literature and as a priority for us is work-based learning, quality work-based learning experiences, and who has access to those, and how do we scale and bring those to bear. And so that's work you're doing in the front lines. All of that doesn't go as well, because unless you're aligned in the place you live and study and the place you want to live and work with the good jobs that are there. So we look at employer alignment, sort of that supply-demand match between the good paying, high demand jobs in a state and the pipelines that are coming through the post-secondary education institutes in that state. And then all of that, if you want to hold that together, you need some data. And how do you really use state longitudinal data systems and enhance and improve those, and not just have them, but use them effectively to inform those decisions? And in all that, we recognize, as we all do today, the multiple benefits of education and training after high school. I'm sure we'll talk about that. So this is not saying career is the only one, but a break-even livable wage seems to go a long ways in people's well-being and their appraisal of their education being worth it. So thank you for that opportunity to share and refresh a little, and we'll share some details maybe in our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Erica. You're really the perfect setup. We've got somebody who's on the boots in the ground in a state, and then we've got national data that is actually being boiled down to the state level to be actionable. So really excited about having you both here. My first question builds off some research done by Trellis Strategies under our Student Financial Wellness Study report for the fall of 2023. For students attending post-secondary educational institutions across the country, 38% of those students considered themselves to be workers attending school rather than students who work. This was a surprising statistic for me, but I wanted to hear your perspectives on this finding and whether or not you think this is a trend that will continue, and if so, why? So I'll start with Erica.
Yeah, I do think it is a trend that will continue. We see that most of the students, and most of the students I work with, as I mentioned, are 16, 17-year-olds. The predominant ones we work with are community college students. And I will add, at Career Connect Texas, we're supporting the leaders in those community colleges. So not a totally direct line to the students, but what we understand as we are providing technical assistance and building capacity with those community college leaders is that most of the students are often part-time students because they have to work, because they're supporting their families, because they have other financial responsibilities beyond just being a student or what we historically would call a traditional full-time student. They don't look like that anymore. And so I think that, even the term traditional college student, it has a different definition in 2024 than it did even maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But I do see that the trend of students who identify as workers who are going to school, I believe will continue, because we know that the cost of education just continues to go up, certainly at both the 2 and 4 year college, both in 2 year and 4 year colleges. And it's just, it's not a reasonable expectation to think that students aren't working. And, we'll get to this in a minute, but it becomes a challenge for really being able to explore a potential new opportunity or their pathway of study if they already have a job that pays them and there's an expectation and can't or don't want to give up to be exploratory. So, right. But yeah, I think the trend will continue.
Yeah, and I want to jump there, but I'm going to wait.
I know. Well, I'll hold.
And I also think that, to your point about traditional students are the minority in this country today. They are not the norm. So it's funny. I guess what we framed, what we're calling the norm, are modern learners that always are balancing or thinking about work and their educational experience as connected as they move forward. So let me turn to Dave now with the same question about this statistic and your thoughts on it. And do you agree with Erica that it's a trend that's going to continue to grow, or are we in a moment?
A couple of things. One, that 38% in your study of this is not just do you work, but it's your identity. Are you identifying yourself as a worker or as a learner?
Oh, right, exactly.
And that's the most intriguing part. The NIPSAS, the Nationally Representative Department of Education survey, that's 2020, like the most recent data, 38% of currently enrolled students are working more than 30 hours a week, right? So you're right on the money with those who are on the cusp or working full time. To your point, Erica, part-time students, right, who are enrolled part-time, 80% of those individuals are employed while attending. Full-time enrollment, 40% of those individuals are employed while enrolling. And so you get about a quarter that are working 10 hours a week, a quarter that are working 20 hours, you get about 50% that are working half-time, 20%. But there's nowhere in the country where you can work less than 30 hours a week and pay your net price of education at a public bachelor's for 4-year degree institution. So work is a reality. Now, the identity question is one that I don't know how that'll turn. I wonder if we'll see, we're seeing some declines in enrollment by people who are saying, I'm a worker and do I need education to be a worker? Right. And so I wonder how that'll flow, and you get a concentration. And essentially, we need to make the case of the value of education and its connection to your aspirations as a worker. And so I'm curious if we've plateaued kind of with that. I'm working full time and I'm, that 40% kind of a threshold, or will that continue to tip based on who chooses to come into traditional kind of higher education institutions? A lot of people, and we'll talk more, I'm sure, are looking to employers and short-term credentials and industry credentials and other pathways to get the education they want, but it's very much in the framework of career advancement and employment in. So there's a lot going on right now. No surprise to any of us.
No, and so I'm going to jump off of that because when you were talking about that, it made me think about the changes that are coming to jobs as a result of AI. And in particular, the fact that many of and I just saw some data, I have to look to see if I could find it, but many of the jobs that are really entry level coming out of college, employers believe the majority of them can now be done by AI, which will bring us back to why it's so important that somebody have work experience alongside their, and not just not working at 7-Eleven or Buc-ee's, but working in something that is tied to their career, this term career connected learning, because there aren't going to be those sort of entry-level jobs anymore. You're going to need to come in and go, a little bit higher. Is that what you all are hearing as well? Or is, again, this isn't today, but it's not too far in the distant future? And Dave, I'll start with you since you're the one who prompted my question.
Erica came off mute, so she's ready. We'll save a little time, Erica. I don't know for the extent you hear a lot about skills-based hiring, and you hear a lot about AI, and will degrees be as essential, right? And the pathways in and where they go. So we still are in a tight labor market, and there will still be jobs, and I think we'll need jobs, and we'll need educated and skilled and talented workers. Now, the ability to use AI effectively, and then what does that create in terms of, like, we've always been fortunate in our nation to have technology improve productivity, and that's fueled our economy and our strength. And so how will this fuel our productivity? And so what those early career jobs are may change and open up. But I think the people skills and the application and the translation and the creative problem solving, those human skills, will remain very important. So I'm optimistic, not that AI will displace people, but AI will require us all to continue to adapt and learn and progress in order to meet at that intersection of technology and service and product, and where do we fit right on that frontier. But Erica, I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, Dave, you've said a lot of the things that I was thinking, and I think that the jury is still out because AI is changing everything so fast. But I do think that there are those, what we have historically called soft skills, those communication skills that are still required for, some entry level, occupations. And I think it crosses sectors. If you think about healthcare, you think about education, you think about even advanced manufacturing, which, AI may change significantly the technology that supports advanced manufacturing, but there still need to be people there that, do some of the coding and the preparing of the machines that do that advanced manufacturing work. I mean, I think about just healthcare in particular as one example of, they're in Central Texas where Trellis is based, and really across the state, healthcare is a high priority sector with in-demand jobs and just a multitude of occupations that are generally trained and skilled in the community college system. Of course, nurses need to have a bachelor's degree, but there are lots of other folks that work in surgery tech and radiology tech and labs, and even the supply and logistics chain and hospital systems that need skilled, knowledgeable folks to do those jobs. And so those jobs aren't going away. They may get modified by AI in some capacity. It may create more efficiencies, but you still have to have that human component. And, we'll talk, I'm sure, about, examples of earn and learn, but I do have a number of examples where I've seen this on the ground in a hospital, actually in Austin, where we do some work, where, young students who've had experiences getting trained in CTE programs are doing these jobs, and, those aren't going away.
No, I agree. And I think you will agree with this, Erica. I'm on a mission to get everybody to stop saying soft skills and switch to essential skills, durable skills, whatever they are, but there's nothing soft about them, right? Especially.
No, and we hear very, very often when we engage with employers that those essential skills, those durable skills are the most in demand of the skill sets that employers need of their, entry level workers or just workers in general. That sometimes the hard skills that are associated with the occupation are teachable on the job at times, but it's those durable skills that are really the in-demand pieces.
Yeah, so let's jump right in now with some additional questions that get at what I think Erica's been dying to talk about. So for these modern learners, as we call them, who must work through their academic journeys, what can we do, or what are some strategies you've seen to help maximize their employment experiences without compromising their academic performance or credential attainment, or even thinking about the jobs that they are doing in order to pay the bills? How do we get them to make that switch? And I know it has a lot to do with making sure internships are paid or work experiences are paid at a level that sort of basically replaces that work, but getting them to go from that to something that is actually going to help them move forward. I'm going to start with Erica this time.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the paid work experience. All work is valuable. And I think we have to get away from this idea that, oh, you're in school and this is an internship and it's part of your education. It's work outside the classroom and it should be paid. So, starting with getting employers to understand and buy into this is paid work experience, which ultimately supports their talent pipeline. When they pay the people that work for them, they have a much higher likelihood of retaining those people or bringing them back in after they're done with their education as part of their talent pipeline management strategy. But it's a very difficult challenge to have a student who has to pay for their education and their living expenses, and their job might be at, a fast food restaurant that's paying them a reasonably good hourly wage. It's a challenge to convince them that aligning with their occupational pathway that they're studying in school will be meaningful. I think there are ways to convince young people that it is a valuable move to make when you think about the long game, not just the short-term hourly wage that they may be getting, but to think about, I'll go back to the hospital example, students who work in the hospitals that are part of their CTE programs and these paid internships or paid youth apprenticeships have the potential to be first in line for hiring for full-time jobs, have potential for benefits. And I think explaining and educating young students or any students or learners that the, sort of overall compensation, when you are able to have insurance, when you're able to save for your future, when you're able to have tuition benefits, even the hospital system I keep referencing, as part of their program for paid interns, if they come back and work, there's a tuition reimbursement benefit. So I think that it's messaging and education around aligning to occupations, the occupation that you're studying, that it's worth making the switch. But that's sometimes hard to see when you're a student that is, struggling to get by and maybe doesn't have that social capital of family or people that they know that can help explain sort of that longer visibility, that long game approach.
Right. And I think also, I think that employers are looking for people with experience. So your chances of getting hired and not being in the category of a year out without being able to get a job go down dramatically, or the ability to get a job goes up dramatically if you have that experience. So hopefully that's part of a compelling argument as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that any student who's been able to, again, we're thinking about healthcare, work in a clinical setting and understand patient care and how you communicate, and again, some of those durable skills that you learn through these experiences, that goes a long way in reducing the sort of on-ramp element of hiring somebody. When you've just had some legitimate experience in the occupation that you've studied. So I think it's helpful.
Yeah. Let's bring Dave into this conversation.
Well, there's so much.
Yes.
This tension of balancing education and career, it's the number one obstacle, the number one reason individuals who started college and stopped out before completing a credential or degree, it's their number one kind of attribution for why they stopped. And when we did some in-depth survey work and focus group work with aspiring adult learners, these were individuals who were actively considering enrolling and pursuing post-secondary education. And they talk about, 45% said this is a barrier, right? This balancing education and work. And they were seeking both economic well-being, but also emotional well-being, right? Control over their schedules, a sense that they were fulfilling a promise to a parent or an uncle or a loved one, a sense that they were doing something for their community or their own children. So a lot going on, not just pay, but stability, security, predictability, and better for those around them. And we're actually asking people to go right in the opposite direction to make that long-term bet, Erica, that you talked about, right? Here you're going to spend money for education, and you're going to lose work hours, and you're going the other way with that, and you're also going to have less control of your time and your schedule. So how do we make the academic experience accessible and receptive and all of those things? And we're asking for a real leap of faith to make that short-term, investment of their hopes, dreams, time, money, energy, health, well-being, all those things for the long-term benefit. And anytime where we've been successful, human nature, we're successful doing that, there's got to be enough confidence that I can get the desired outcome on the other end. And I think that's, if I would summarize all of sort of the kind of current zeitgeist about post-secondary ed, is people want the promise they can become anything, right? Unlimited human potential and the power of individuals and opportunity, but they desperately want the certainty they'll become something. And that emotional aspiration is still alive and well in the American public. The promise you can become anything, the certainty that post-secondary education will get you there, right, is fragmenting. And so what are the outcomes? What do you do in their other pathways? So I think everything we can do to connect their education experiences and their work experiences along the way. And so how do we do that, right? Okay, stop the job you've got where you know the shift supervisor and you can work your schedule and you've got two friends who will swap out for you on your own if the supervisor wanted. There's a lot going on with that job they have that we're asking them to switch for a 3-month internship or a 6-month part-time. And so that's a big ask for some people. Some can do it, but how do we help individuals who are in current employment experiences maximize the value of that time and that energy? How do we work with local employers to be intentional about the development of durable and essential skills, not just say, the cream rises to the top. But what do you do actively? How do you coach those students and those learners to say, yeah, sure, you're working here, but here are the 3 things I want you to pay attention to, and do this experiment at work in your staff meeting or with your thing for the next 3 months and write it up as your assignment for class. So how do we blend kind of the active learning that takes place in the workplace with intentionality, with the academic kind of framing, understanding, seeing what's happening? So from very pragmatic things where the employer takes a lot of responsibility to wherever we can without overburdening students and leaving it all on them, how do we help them see the opportunities they have and then let them make choices to the best they can as they juggle all of that? One thing of note, many institutions right now are actively looking at how can they get better value out of their work study and their campus employment by being more intentional, because the supply of paid internships, right, like you're dependent on employers. So what can we do with what we can control on our campus, and making real efforts to train supervisors and staff and faculty and students and make those higher quality experiences. So there's a lot going on in this space right now, trying to innovate and figure it out in response to the questions about the value of education. So that's kind of a fire hose. Sorry.
That's right. No, that's good. And I'm going to push a little bit more detail on this in terms of, what can not only institutions but employers do to help these modern learners understand the value of this and how to market their experiences when they go to employers. But what do you think on both sides? Because it's obvious that employers need people with certain skill sets. Institutions want to be able to demonstrate the value of an education at their institution. You both have talked about it in sort of general terms, but are there any real experiences or examples that you could share where you think it's working really well? And I'm going to start with Erica because she keeps alluding to some things. So I think she's got some examples.
Yeah, the one that keeps coming to mind is healthcare, and I'll touch on other sectors too. But a program that's happening at a hospital in Austin, those work experiences are summer work experiences, and so they're not expecting students to give up their part-time job maybe during the school year, but commit to a job in the summer that pays, and then again that opportunity to interview for a full-time job. And these are often students that have just graduated from high school. I think the other piece is in some of the community colleges that are training future educators. The employer is the college, or the employer is the district. And so, it's internal. And so that you have a level of control. And even in some CTE programs where, either at a district or a college, it might not be educators, the sector of education that you're training, but you could be training, manufacturing and HVAC and electrical and electricians, and all of those skills and occupations. They need those folks too on the campuses. And so there are really, sort of to what Dave's comment, like there are creative ways to embed work-based learning and, opportunities for real world learning aligned with the education in your backyard. So that makes it a little more accessible, I think. And when, I'm thinking about accessibility, I mean, some of the things we haven't even touched on are, some of these, the support, the surrounding supports, that transportation, the appropriate clothing, some of those things that make getting to a job often a challenge. So if it's right there on your campus where you're already learning, it's a little more accessible. The challenge there is that doesn't always scale out big because there's just only so many jobs on a campus, for example. But it's a good place to start, and it's a good place to explore if you are a student or if you are an educator, in the college system or the high school system, sort of looking at home first, before trying to reach out to a bunch of other employers.
Yeah, I'm going to add to your example in the greater Austin area. So I think it was last year we had the Del Valley superintendent, and we had Mark Sherry from Baylor Scott and White, which is a hospital system here in the greater Austin area. And they had created a program, I think it was it's either juniors, where 2 days a week, they would bus them to Baylor Scott and White during their senior year, or maybe junior and senior year, and they would work and they would learn. And at the end of that year, and the other 3 days they'd be in school, I think Mark said they were ready to offer jobs to something, like 80 or 90% of those individuals, but only half could accept. And do you know why?
The transportation? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once they graduated from high school, they couldn't get, Del Valley is south of the airport, so south of Austin. They couldn't get up to the hospitals. So to your point about some of the support services that are needed and thinking about, how we can help people continue. And if they had gone to work at Baylor Scott & White, they would have been put in a program where they would have been upskilled and continued their education at really no cost to them and to be able to move forward. And I think it's looking at those types of partnerships and pathways that can help people who come from, low-income backgrounds that don't have the resources to do what we all take advantage of, which is being able to go to work every day, get in a car or on a bus or a subway or whatever it is, and to get to work and come home. But a lot of people, that isn't even available to them. So I think you're right, Erica, is thinking about all the support pieces that go along with that. Sorry, I wanted to add on before I turned it over to you, Dave, because we were on the hospital thing.
Oh, keep going. Deb, I think you asked, Deborah, sorry, you asked kind of examples of where this is working well, and in both on the employer and on the side. And so Strata is fortunate as a philanthropy that we get to make grants as well. And a couple of years ago, our colleagues on our team did a employer community college partnership set of 11 grantees, where the community college was to come with the employer together. So it wasn't, we'll give you a grant and go find the employer, but an existing relationship, employer and grants, and come forward with a way in which you can integrate this kind of blend between education and workforce, frontline workforce needs. And so we've seen really that collaboration, and it's interesting to hear, just like you get those 11 employers and those 11 community colleges in a room, and you sort of help them listen to each other, and employers go, oh, I never realized, and the community college goes, oh, I never realized. And so something about this communication across those frontiers and intermediaries, like Erica, I'm sure you're doing so much of this, where you're helping the two groups understand one another's needs. Now, we do that maybe better in community colleges with non-credit, right? Like, why is that not, how can we make that credit, and how can we recognize prior learning or work-based learning or competency-based education? A lot of individuals are worried that they're not cut out for school, right? That they'll fail. And so this experience of showing that there's credit and progress in things you've already demonstrated. So those are real powerful opportunities for individuals and employers. What we do see is, Erica, as you noted, and healthcare classically and others, employers who have large entry-level workforce needs are more willing to invest in paid internships. It's a part of their talent strategy. And then you think, how do you aggregate for the small and medium employers in your communities? And you start to need intermediaries or dedicated programs and leaders at institutions kind of at that frontier to connect the two groups and articulate those. So we're starting to see, again, more and more that there are some intermediaries that are aggregating at micro scale, so micro internships or sprinternships, or right, like, are there clearinghouses where you can get real world work-based tasks and faculty can find those and embed them in curriculum, and things that, again, there's a real spectrum or continuum of quality work-based learning experiences, and how do we make those equitably accessible to a wide range of students and across disciplines, for sure. The one, apprenticeship degrees, it's kind of started with teaching, but the ability to work as a teaching apprentice and earn your bachelor's degree and become a certified K through 12 teacher, right? Like, there's some models in apprenticeship, but also those things can translate into degree and other credentials. And just how do we increasingly let our systems recognize people, right, and their progress? So Those are some of just the trends that we're seeing as we look across states and employers and institutions.
Yeah, Deb, you're actually reminding me. I spent some time in Maine this summer, and Maine has a major shortage of nursing home help. In fact, they've had to close 50% of their nursing homes in the state, 50%. And the legislature is putting forward a bill because they don't pay these folks. It's kind of like teachers. They don't pay them enough money. And we get creative when it gets to dire straits, right? So the legislature is planning to put in place a minimum salary of $80,000 a year. This is in Maine. This is rural. $80,000 a year plus benefits to be a worker so that they can they're very worried about their aging population and the fact that these folks are going to there's not going to be anybody to take care of them. So there's also this piece, and I know, I think it's in the greater Austin area, Erica can help me with this, but I know they were looking at providing housing to teachers because teachers could not afford to live in the district in which they taught. And unfortunately, when it gets to these crisis situations, that's when we all start to get creative and bring in, local, state, federal dollars to help to deal with this. But it is thinking about a little outside the box. And 40 years ago, my sister went to Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. It is a co-op program. It is a 5-year program where you work for 6 months and go to school for 6 months, and you work in your industry. You make a wage enough to pay your bills and pay your tuition. It takes 5 years instead of 4, but you come out with a degree. You have great work experience, and usually the organization that you've worked for during your program hires you. And that's exactly what happened. And I've always wondered, Dave and Erica, why these programs, I know Drexel has one, and I think there are a couple of other institutions that are starting to look at this or have done something on a smaller scale, but is that where we're headed? Is that the direction that we need to head in, as opposed to tinkering around the edges with internships and apprenticeships and just throwing it out there for you all to opine on?
I was going to, in some ways, that is a really interesting and creative model, but I was going to go lean back on apprenticeships as, they're sort of having a moment again. Here we are in, the 21st century, and they're, over the last 10 years, they've, started to have a moment, but apprenticeships are a very, it's an old tried and true model of training, and, it embeds working and earning and learning all at the same time. So it's just, the framework looks a little different, but it's in essence the same thing. And it's just a matter of, I think, trying to convince employers, sort of to your point, like when you get to this dire situation, how do we, improve the pipeline of talent that comes into any sectors? You mentioned education and Del Valle, and we work with Del Valle, and actually they were one of the schools that worked in the healthcare work that I was talking about. But I'll also mention and elevate, so I think most of our audience here may be Texas folks, but down in Brazosport, which is south of Houston, they really curated what I would consider to be sort of an exemplar program of educator apprentices and educator apprenticeships. They recognized that they didn't have enough teachers. That's a common thing across the state, but they got creative and they looked at their budget line and they said, okay, well, we have all these, we have substitute lines in our budget, and what if we converted that to pay for the apprentices? And they started with they had sort of multiple on-ramps to take into consideration the accessibility of, maybe they were incumbent workers that worked in the school in the cafeteria or in, the custodial area, or they drove the bus, and they clearly enjoyed being around students and in a school setting. And so was there an opportunity to upskill them through, training them getting them enrolled in programs at the community college to get them to that associate's degree level and then to build off of that, all the while they're still working. So, I mean, I think, I think it's not that apprenticeship is necessarily creative, again, because it's been around a long time, but it's just thinking, outside the norms that we have been conditioned to think about for building talent, in any sector. So, I don't work in the four-year space nearly as much to know other programs like you mentioned, Northeastern and Drexel, but I think it's to survive, I think we have to be creative and think of new ways of approaching higher education.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the browser sports. I remember seeing a story on the local news in Austin about a custodial worker who was apprenticing to become an educator in a local school. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I think that was last year, but very cool. Dave, your thoughts?
You see apprenticeships models that are more hardwired in European countries, for example. There are plenty of states that go and look and understand and try to do it. And it's really interesting to think about what are the forces that create enough investment in coordinating standards and expectations and enough kind of employer commitment that a rising tide will lift all boats, right? That we can provide this training and the investment it takes for an employer to participate with an apprentice, and does that apprentice stay or go or come or whatever it is. So I know states that are considering ways in which to do that with regional employer educator partnerships and try to invest in those more actively around core economic development priorities. So I think we'll still see spots of that, but the trick is how to make these enduring beyond the current generation of leaders at those institutions and partnerships, and enough to get the momentum that they perpetuate, right? And also that each economy and each set of, it's a little different. I mean, we're a big country with a lot of diversity in industry space and people. It's different than Switzerland, right, on scale. So I think we'll continue to see that. The thing I think is the biggest sort of unknown right now is to start to get our hands around the value of non-degree credentials and micro-credentials and other ways to signal value and recognize preparation and experience, and how do those then not become cul-de-sacs, right? Like they bundle and they stack and they package and they move with an individual into future opportunities as they upskill and go forward. And I think there's a little bit of proliferation of lots of things. And my guess is that over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll start to see some clarification of quality and, establishment of standards and expectations of which of these have a value in the workplace and a value to the individuals. And you're seeing traditional higher education institutions that are pairing those credentials with a degree so that you can study anything, but you can also get a data analytics credential while you're studying art history. Or, it's some of those combination of durable skills with entry, career entry, early career things you can take in to the workforce.
No, I think that's great. And, we are starting to see a number of, I'll call them apprenticeship intermediaries popping up. Because I think internships, especially at, smaller or mid-sized organizations, that's a big lift for them to maybe take on a handful. But most of the companies, the employers in this country are not big, gigantic organizations. It's smaller organizations. So I also think to facilitate this move towards apprenticeships, we're going to need more intermediaries that can facilitate that piece between the employer, much like what Educate Texas is doing, but between the employer and the institution, and much like the work that Dave Strada has done in bringing together community colleges, employers to have that conversation. But then somebody has to be that in the middle that sort of facilitates the in and the out. So it lowers, I think, the lift for small to medium-sized companies to participate. Yeah.
And Northeastern's built that community over time, and right, it's
Yes.
perpetuated, right? But Erica, what you point to is, opportunities to build that, and then those intermediaries, and I think all of the support and the understanding and like the human-centered things that you do, like there's curriculum and there's credit and there's work and there's placement, and then there's a person in the middle there who's still got to navigate those frontiers, and those intermediaries will be valuable to all three parties, I think, to really make this work.
Yeah, and I would double click on that. I mean, as an intermediary, the relationships between these colleges and employers and other workforce boards, those matter, and that they be trusted relationships, because you are investing a ton of energy and time, both from the employer side and from the educator side and from the student side. So, I mean, you mentioned sort of the scalability of all of this and the durability of these programs. I mean, we want to get it right and to allow these frameworks of programs or successful programs. We want them to stick around, because that's if getting folks to jobs is the end goal, making livable wages, that's you got to have trusted relationships between all the parties.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop to see if we have any questions from those folks that are tuning in virtually. So there is another possible nugget for discussion. Second-gen education efforts can help communities, families who may usually see post-secondary education as a distraction from providing for their families. Yeah, and I think you see that. I think that's a reality that occurs. And I think there's also, and I think Erica is probably familiar with San Antonio Works and, what they've done in terms of going out into the community. So going back to this trusted advisor, and if you grew up in a community where you don't have any role models of people who have gone on to post-secondary ed, and you hear that the cost of college puts you in all this debt. I mean, you can't pick up a paper or go online without seeing how much college debt is. Are you advising your child not to go this route and instead, do the tried and true thing? What I love about what San Antonio Works is doing is that they are going out into the community and they are partnering with trusted advisors, whether they are churches or community groups, and then recommending programs that are stepping stones to getting into something, which then will help them to have money to continue on. And Erica, you may know more about this, but I've just been incredibly impressed by the work that they're doing there. And if I remember correctly, that was funded by a very small increase in their city tax base, right?
Yeah, they had a program. They passed a bond that was, I don't remember how much was, but I mean, it was pennies, and raised a lot of money to create a program called Ready to Work. And then San Antonio Works, because they have so many relationships with employers in the community, were able to help, and Alamo colleges too, help, get folks into jobs. I know San Antonio Works, the work we've done with them has been really about getting young people into internships. But I mean, again, it's those trusted relationships with businesses. They know that those students are going to come in and they're going to be ready to work, no pun intended, but like just, skilled and understand expectations and able to have a job experience. I'll add one more thing that I think, to your point about, or to the questioner's point about, not engaging in higher education because of the costs associated. I mean, I'll point to ACC, Austin Community College, and now, any student that goes to a Austin ISD school can attend ACC for free. And I mean, it doesn't totally eliminate barriers to entry, particularly if they're cultural or family pressures that you just got to go to work, and that's real. But I think that there are opportunities around for and efforts being made to reduce those barriers, and but sometimes it's just communication. I think some of the biggest thing that gets in the way for a lot of this work is the messaging and the communication. We all can do a better job of communicating with students, whether they are secondary or post-secondary, or even opportunity youth. Those trying to get at those students who are not in school or working, to share opportunities of how to get engaged and to be trained and skilled, to get to those good jobs.
Dave, did you want to add anything to that?
I'm just appreciative, as you said at the start, Deb, to have Erica with us, who's on the front lines of doing this work, and so many who I know are listening, participating with us today, of really transforming individual lives. And we think of all the capital and the human capital of somebody who's willing to invest their hopes and their dreams and their aspirations in seeking a better life through education and training. Is that's a pretty sacred responsibility we have if you use that framework to think about these individuals who come and look for a better life, and how can we serve them.
And I think the hard part is, we live and breathe this every day, we know it, but I'm always surprised when I talk to somebody, whether it's in the Lowe's or the Home Depot or the Target or whatever it is. I'm a big talker to people as they're ringing my stuff up. And that they don't know what resources are available. And I do remember hearing from one of the workforce boards that they have money that goes unused every year in childcare waivers, in transportation waivers, in housing assistance, to help people who are trying to get additional education, whether it's a certificate or a degree, et cetera, because nobody knows how to access them, how to get to them. And to be quite honest, they're not always easy to get to. And I think that that's part of the problem. We all see all this stuff and wonder why more people. And I think in part we have a communication problem here on many levels, right? On many, many different levels. So we are at time. I want to thank both of you, Erica, for bringing your real world experience, Dave, for bringing the data and the broader perspective as well. This has been a great conversation. I could keep going, but we won't. We'll stop. And again, thank you both very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And for everybody else who hung in out there through the whole hour, thank you for joining us. I hope you found this very useful. And again, a big thank you to Andrea for pulling this all together. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.